Hello, my amazing algebra half students. This is Mrs. A, and I love math. And today we are doing lesson 65, and it's all about the fractional part in word problems. So we're going to be doing some word problems. And I must say that the Saxon book, the old blue book, has a lot of fun word problems in it. But the equation that the Saxon math book has is F times of equals is. You can use that if you want to. Basically, it's the same thing that I'm going to show you, but it's just kind of a little equation that you can remember. But I will be showing you both the equation and another way just to think of it. Okay, so 5/8 of the gnomes who live in the magic forest had happy faces. If 840 gnomes had happy faces, how many gnomes lived in the magic forest? Now that is a weighty question. We need to find the answer. All right, so we're going to use F times of equals is. So we have F is the fraction, 5/8 of, remember, of is always the times, of the gnomes who lived in the magic forest. So we're going to let the what number be the gnomes that lived in the magic forest, and then they equal 5/8 of all of them equaled 840 because 840 had happy faces. So let's work this one out. Okay, so here I have a little bit smaller board. So you see my cat over there? Come here. Yes. Cats don't like to come and be seen very much, but every once in a while. That cat's name is Bones, just in case you wondered. Bones, yes. Bones with the blue collar. Yes. All right, so 5/8 of what number, the number of gnomes that lived in the forest altogether, is 840. So that's kind of our question, isn't it? So we can look at the formula that they gave us, which was F times of equals is, and the fraction would be 5/8 times the of number, which is going to be the number of total gnomes in the forest. So we're just going to call that T, is the equals the is number, so 840. I just think the equation's a little awkward, but it works. Okay, so 5/8 of the total number of gnomes that we have in the forest is 840. So in order to find out what the total number of gnomes is, which is what we're trying to find, wouldn't we multiply by 8/5, which is the reciprocal here, and then, of course, we must multiply by 8/5 on the other side. Okay, so we get the total, and then we have to do this math. Okay, so we end up with, I'm going to another board. All right, I did the math real quickly for you. I said that 840 divided by 5, since 5 was on the bottom, winds up being 168. Then I took that 168 and I multiplied it by 8, and I got 1,344. So now you don't have to do it. So there's our 1,344. Now, if we had 1,344 gnomes totally in the forest, and we had 840 of them that are happy, how many are sad? Well, wouldn't we take 1,344 and subtract the 840? So 1,344 minus 840, and now we have 504 sad gnomes. So sad. Now let's look at it without this equation. If we were just reading through the word problem, 5/8 of, remember every time you see an of, you're going to think times. So 5/8 times the gnomes that lived in the magic forest. So we're talking about the total number of gnomes that lived in the magic forest had happy faces. And then 840 had happy faces. So wouldn't we say that 5/8 of the total would be 840? Because 840 had happy faces. So you really could have done the whole problem and set it up exactly the same way without the equation. But if the equation makes it easier for you, please use the equation. All right, here is example number 2. On Monday, 2 4/5 times the acceptable number took refuge in the mountain caves. If 640 was the acceptable number, how many took refuge in the mountain caves on Monday? When I read these word problems, it kind of makes me think of Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. If Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers, how many pickled peppers did Peter Piper pick? That was a fun one, right? I wonder if I can do it better than that. Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers. If Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers, how many pickled peppers did Peter Piper pick? All right, so here we go. On Monday, 2 4/5 times the acceptable number took refuge in the mountains. So 640 was the acceptable number. So we're going to say 2 4/5 times, they even told us it's times, the acceptable number, but then down here they told us the acceptable number. And this is how many took refuge on Monday. So all we have to do is multiply that. That's pretty easy, isn't it? So remember, when we're multiplying, we always want to turn our mixed numbers into an improper fraction. So 2 times 5 is 10, plus 4 is 14. So 14/5 times 640. That's all we have to do. But we're out of board, so I will get a new one. So here was our problem. So the first thing we want to do so our numbers don't get too big is take 640 and divide it by 5 first, which I did. I got 128. And then I took 128 and multiplied by 14, and I got 1,792 were hiding in the caves on Monday. Oh my. Saxon does have an incredible imagination. He's seeing ghosts now. When the fog lifted, 400 ghosts were spied, skulking near the outskirts. If 240 ghosts were not spied, what fraction of ghosts was spied? All right, so now we're going to look at the problem. So we had 400 spied, okay? And then it says 240 were not spied. Okay, so then it says what fraction of the ghost was not spied. So we're trying to find out this not spied over total, because that would give us the fraction of the ghost not spied. So the total is 640, and those not spied are 240. So we're looking for 240 out of 640. Isn't that all we have to do? Well, the zeros can cancel, can't they? We can divide both the top and the bottom by 10. What if we divide the top and the bottom by 4? I can do that pretty quickly. What if we divide the top and the bottom by 8? That works. So 24 divided by 8 is 3. And 64 divided by 8 is 8. And the answer is 3/8 of the total number of ghosts were not spied. And now we are done with our examples. It's time for your practice. Okay, here is your practice problem. When the gun sounded, only 2/5 of the racers began to run. If 460 racers began to run, how many racers were there in all? Okay, so we're going to do this one without the little formula or equation first, and then we'll do it with that equation, just so that you can see both ways. Okay, so if I were going to do this without the equation, first of all, I want you to see if you can work it before I work it. So pause your video. All right, hopefully you did that, and now you know the problem. So when the gun sounded, only 2/5 of, okay, so everywhere I see an of, I'm going to put a times. So 2/5 of, I'm going to use the little dot for times, the racers began to run. So we're going to let R be the total number of racers, okay? And 2/5 of all the racers began to run, okay? Now, the 460 racers began to run. So couldn't I say that 2/5 of all the racers equaled 460? Okay, so 2/5 of all the racers, so we're going to let that be R, began to run. If 460 racers began to run, so isn't the began to run equal to 460? So I'm going to say 2/3 of R equals 460. Okay, and how many racers are there in all? So we're looking for the R, which is how many racers there are in all. So we're going to put 5 halves, and over here 5 halves. This cancels, and we get R all by itself. R equals. Now when I cut this in half, I'm going to divide by 2 first. I get 230 times the 5. Okay, so let's see if we can do that. And then that's going to be a 0. We'll put it here, 0. And 3 times 5 is 15. Carry the 1. And 2 times 5 is 10, plus the 1 is 11. So 1,150 racers in all. Now we're going to do the same problem with the equation. Okay, here was the equation. Now remember that the problem said that when the gun sounded, only 2/5. So we'll put the 2/5 here of the racers. So the of number is of the racers. So times of the racers. So we're going to say racers. Okay, and so this is just talking about the of number, whatever number they're talking about after the of. Okay, and then equals, and then 460 racers began to run. Now they don't really have an is in this problem anywhere, but the 460 are the racers that began to run, so we're going to say 460. Okay, this one did not have an is, but we have the same equation, and we're going to work it exactly the same way. Multiply by 5 halves over here, and multiply by 5 halves over here, and we get R is, and we get the same answer, 1150, that we just did before. So you could do it with the equation, or you could just do it knowing that every time they say of, that means times, and every time they say is, that means equal to. Okay, so basically some of these you're just going to have to pick apart and figure out where it goes. Here, we had to reason it out a little bit, didn't we? Because it says 2/5 of the racers. So it's 2/5 of the total number of racers that began to run. So it's 2/5 that began to run. And then the 460 were the ones that began to run. So it's 2/5 of the total equals the 460. And that's what we had here as our equation. And right here, 2/5 of the total is the 460. So it takes a little bit of practice, and it's time for you to do that. So do your homework. This is Mrs. A, and may God bless your day.